the feeling that Alex was giving her was that this band, as such, when that would happen, was that it was almost getting tighter and tenser, and because the separation between the knees as they were going back was staying constant as such.
Correct.
Right? Welcome back to the channel, guys. Kerrod Gray here today on the range at Reigate Hill, standing next to my good friend Alex Clapp. Alex, thanks for coming along.
Thanks for having me.
Alex is a top coach here based in the UK at Enmore Park Golf Club. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about some functional matchups for some specific individuals that, instead of just trying to achieve positions for the look of it, that actually made a huge difference to their performance and outcomes. Lots of great information here. Stay tuned. Okay, Al, so what we've got here, player of a high level, right?
Yep.
And she came to you and she was struggling with big blocks and hooks.
Yep.
Right? So performance-wise, she was struggling. When it came to certain events or situations, she was really struggling to get it done, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, with the way that you go through your coaching process, it's not necessarily just making these changes for the sake of making something look a bit prettier. It's all based around function relative to that person's level of competition and what they're trying to achieve with their golf going forward, right?
Yeah.
So you had a thorough discussion with this girl. We kind of analyzed the ins and outs of where you feel like her performance was lacking relative to her expectations and her frustrations. And this is a bit of an example here, and we've got her down the line on the left-hand side and her face on the right. And from this, what we're going to be talking about here is the changes that you implemented into this player's golf swing. Okay? So talk me through it here.
So for me with Davina, I mean, the first thing I feel with better players is you need to get the buy-in from them, right? Especially better players, you need to get them playing better golf instantly. And you get a lot of people that talk about they don't want to go around doing quick fixes. They don't want to go around, they kind of want to get the player on a plan that they want to move them toward. But for me, with an elite player, you need to get the buy-in, you need to get them playing better straight away, right? So we're looking at the biggest bang for the buck here with Davina, and she basically, setup wise, was really good. She does that from a very, very high standard. Nothing we need to change from there. And something for me, I'm very big into setup. Setup's everything. If your balance points are off, if your alignment's off, and all these type of things, you're going to have to make some sort of functional reaction during the rest of their swing in order for them to do things at a higher standard or to get the club back onto the ball, right? To deliver a ball flight.
It's so true, though, we see that follow-on effect, and I preach this to so many of the online and in-person clients that I have, is that a lot of players devalue the importance of good setup pieces, and also then extending into the earlier stages of the swing. And they focus so much on this tiny section of the golf swing because there might be certain clickbait information or trends that are going through, or their player said, oh, you need to shallow it a little bit better or rotate harder. Now, it's all relative to where that player is at that time.
100%.
And it's amazing how often when working with high-level players, we actually spend so much time actually just doing these initial pieces.
Setup basics and fundamentals, and everybody, and each as an individual coach, you'll have your own fundamental basics that you like to implement with a player, right? But for me, there's kind of some absolute things that we have to do, like essential things that you have to do within a golf swing from a setup perspective, not even from a swing perspective. And this for me is more important than anything else, because everyone can get in the correct setup position, right? Everyone can get in the correct alignment and posture and hip tilts and things like that relative to their anatomy, but more so relative to, okay, this is what, you know, these are the non-negotiables here. This is what you need to do. So with Davina, the only actual one thing we've seen from her setup is she was quite right side dominant here. You can see there's a lot of pressure back in that right leg, and she kind of hang backs a little bit in that right leg. You can see that a little bit from her structure of her kind of pelvis and her legs. Her legs kind of her leg here is tilted a little bit this way. Okay.
For sure.
So she had a lot of pressure, more so, not weight, more so pressure, was very much trail side dominant.
So just to define the difference in a simplistic sort of way for the golfers at home, right? The difference between pressure and weight from this standpoint. We're talking more about the orientation of their body relative
to...
Yeah,
your mass or your weight is more this, and your pressure, you can't visibly see it. Yeah, you can see here though that I'm shifting my pressure about, but I'm not moving my mass or my centers around, okay? Yeah. So with Davina, she had a very, very good even weight distribution, but you could see her pressures were very trail side dominant, okay? When she got her pressures trail side dominant, she's instantly restricting the amount her pelvis can turn and load in the backswing, and that's kind of what we're going to get onto now, describing her main problem was. So for me, Davina, with being this trail side dominant here, she then see a big kind of lateral shift of the pelvis to the right, okay? As you can see here, if I just whiz that back really quick, get rid of a couple of those lines, and we draw a little line on the right side of her pelvis here.
Yeah, and we'll also make note to what happens kind of in the foot here with her pressure and visually. So as she makes that shift, we can see that she shifts considerably away from the target in the backswing. The hips tend to slide. We can see that this trail knee almost gets this kind of like flexed out
buckling
position.
Outwards,
buckling out. And we can see when we zoom in really close on this trail foot that as she's moving, it's almost like she's rolling it outwards.
Right? Like her pressures are more so moving that foot clockwise during the backswing.
So the effect that from this address position was having, it was kind of loading too much pressure on the trail side, which was inhibiting her ability to, as you just said then, pivot in such a way which would produce the motion that you were looking for to rectify some of the issues. And then what was the follow-on effects from there?
So the follow-on effects from there, because she shifted excessively to the right in her backswing, what you would see is you would see her arm, and her trail arm specifically from down the line perspective, would get very much, keep going from there, trapped behind her here. And it would make a little bounce behind her during the backswing. More so because then, and like I was saying to you before, I'm a big believer, a big preacher in kind of freedom of rotation and freedom to just move better. Her arms kind of become a little bit independent from what her torso and her rib cage was doing. So she would go to the top because that shift was to the right, and then from here it would almost bounce behind her, right? And as soon as she's done that, she's kicking that path away from the inside, and that was the biggest cause of that hook or trying to hold it off and hit that block motion that you would see.
Yeah, and if we zoom in really closely and we look at the change of direction, almost from when her torso stops rotating, let's say about here, from there, that bounce, which is a great way of describing it, you can see that the hands kind of have this look that they drop
they're kind of here. And from here, instead of kind of keeping her arms more in front of her rib cage, in front of her torso, from here what you see is that as soon as you get the change of direction during transition, that kind of happened, that bounce of the trail elbow behind her. And a lot of that, to be honest with you, with female players is to do with them trying to generate a little bit more speed.
Correct.
Right? And so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but for her, for the bull flight she wanted to see, it made it into a problem, because from this position here, there was no way really that she could recover to get that club back out in front of her to produce the required club path through the ball.
And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we start doing our demonstration in a second, but I suppose the catchphrase of being stuck, right? This is essentially what most players do. And we see this with a lot of junior golfers, a lot of very mobile players, is that they get into a position in their golf swing where they're just trying to then work extremely hard from that this position here to try and save it. And as soon as your arms get too deep and across your chest, from there they've got really one path.
And I think the other way to think about that as well, and one thing that I actually had a big debate on the other day, is what is stuck. So stuck to one player is not stuck to another player. Stuck to this elite amateur was getting here, right? Whereas I had another player the other day that said he felt like he was stuck and he was out here. So I just feel like I'm stuck, I can't get to the ball, right? So the idea of putting a terminology of stuck on her was fine, because that was her definition of it.
Correct.
But then another player's idea of stuck can be getting really bunched up in here, you know, so having it all relative to the player as well is quite essential, I think.
So if you set up to this golf ball here, we'll kind of talk them through. So if she had a little bit too much pressure, just shift her back on this trail side here, and then from the top of the swing, that stopped her from being able to rotate as well as an exaggeration. And as you keep making your way to the top, this trail arm tends to have this bouncing movement like that. So let's say the chest would stop rotating and the trail arm would move when she was changing direction. From there, as she would come down, you keep going down, 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 the golf club gets to a position where it's essentially too far behind her.
Correct.
Right. And then what we would generally see with her and a lot of other players is then the path of the golf club would move too far out to the right. Now, talk about why, aside from the swing direction, the path going too far out to the right, why would the ball overhook from that as well.
Because what's happening from this position is she's trying to react as a player to get the club to come back on, the ball to come back on the target line.
Very good.
Right? So because her path is coming excessively from the inside in here, she's seeing a very, very open club face.
Yeah.
So what she's doing as a reaction is having a lot of hand action to try to square the face. As she tries to square the face gets excessively shut to what her path is, causing the big hook.
Yeah.
Or she kind of backs up a little bit too much and tries to hold that face off a little bit excessively through it, which would in turn cause the big block as well.
And this is the challenge with a lot of players, is because they play when they're out on the golf course with subconscious proficiency based on feels. And a lot of the time they might have been playing with feels for 2 or 3 years.
Absolutely.
But every skill that we learn in life, especially in golf, is perishable. And we see a lot of players do regress into old patterns if they don't work hard on their maintenance. So if she's not mindful around where her swing is at the moment, is very often she might try and produce a feel that she thought, I don't know, a few months ago or a couple of years ago worked for her.
Yeah.
So having this constant accountability with her coach to make sure, okay, this is exactly what you're doing, rather than just going, I think this is what we're doing.
Yeah, it's the knowledge and awareness from the player's standpoint to actually want to learn and understand what their move is and what their tendencies are.
Yeah.
Especially those tendencies and those movements under pressure during tournament play.
Yeah.
Because they'll be over exaggerated when she gets into those situations. She'll think, oh, I want to get more in here because I feel a little bit safer in here.
Yeah.
Whereas in actual fact, it would compound the issue and make the ball flight even worse.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't actually getting that club back out in front of her to produce that desired ball flight that she wanted. She loved to see a draw, but she hated to see it overhook. So her idea of getting it back on the inside was okay, because she was like, oh, I'm trying to hit my draw from there.
Yeah.
But when it gets there and she gets excessively inside, it shuts off her rotations. She then has to get very handsy, another term that you'll see a lot in the golf industry, but she has to do a lot with the hands to try and square it.
Yeah.
And so shutting off her rotations then actually limit the amount that she can kind of produce power, produce speed through the ball, and rotational freedom through the ball. Everything's kind of becoming a lot independent and nothing's really working as more of a unit as one.
At the end of the day, her sequence relative to the level of golf in which she aspired to play wasn't in such a way, or wasn't proficient enough to produce the results that she was looking for.
Exactly.
So let's talk about now the adjustments and the changes that were made to encourage a pivot and an arm structure relative to where her chest rotation is, that allowed her to get the golf club a little bit more
so
in front of her.
So we done 2 things in isolation. The first thing we done, and kind of the main cause and the main thing that we needed to work on, was the use of, and I like a lot of use of bands, right? And this was to correct her pivot.
Okay.
Right? So what we done was we got the band, we put it around her knees here, okay? And what you'll see when people do this is a big restriction of what they kind of want to do and want to see. Now, when we got the band around here, around her knees, what we were trying to do essentially was relieve the pressure in that right leg. Okay, to try and get that pivot to actually sequence a lot better through the backswing. So we used the use of the band to try to feel like she was losing tension in the band through the backswing.
Yeah, wow, okay, great.
Okay, so through the backswing, she would basically, she would maintain the tension in the band because of how much her pelvis would sway to the right, and you would strengthen, this band would get, more tight, and her knee would buckle to the right. So the idea for her was to just feel like, especially initially, we just got her without a golf club, hands across the chest, just learning this movement of the pelvis to try to free up what that right leg was doing. Okay. Now, I don't mind any shift to the right in the backswing with a lot of my players, but I like to see a lot of them with kind of a very, very centered pivot.
Within reason,
Okay, within reason. So she can kind of shift off the ball like this as much as she wants, as long as this kind of motion happens through the backswing. Now, the idea of keeping this tight for her was, it was straight away, it flicked her into hitting a very, very centered pivot, which straight away kept the club more in front of her during backswing. Right? So with it, from there, we did need to go on and do a bit more work with her, which we're going to show shortly. So what we done with Davina really was keeping this band around the knees, and it's very, very simple training aid. You can get them anywhere, You don't have to be overcomplicated to pay an arm and a leg for something that's going to really help your golf swing. So we put this around her knees, and we were basically trying to feel like she relieved the pressure in this band as she turned and she coiled to the top of her backswing. Okay.
Just do that again for me.
Yeah.
So, as you'll see, from when Alex makes this move, where his trail hip is, it's never really moving away from the target, okay? So if you set up to the ball, Perfect. And this golfer, if I have this golf club just as a reference outside of your right hip, let's show them what she was doing previously. So you can see that she's pushing a long way into this golf club. Now, the feeling that Alex was giving her was that this band, as such, when that would happen, was that it was almost getting tighter and tenser, and because the separation between the knees as they were going back was staying constant as such.
Correct.
Right? And when you actually make the correct move here, so you set up to it and pivot better, you almost feel this loosen a little bit.
And the thing with that as well, the reason why then that will create almost like a bull's width gap on your right hip.
Yeah.
Okay. Reason for that is because your pelvis is in an oval shape.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you imagine your pelvis is here like this, and your pelvis rotates, again, I like the idea of rotational freedom. Pelvis rotating good amount in the backswing to complete shoulder turn, so that you can hit from the inside without making any sacrifices. Right? So because your pelvis is that shape, as you rotate that pelvis, it's not going to slide to the right. You're going to see that bull's width gap on the right hand side because of the shape of that pelvis, really.
Exactly.
So what we really focused on essentially was just really diving into making sure she completed that turn. And what that straight away done is it kept her arms in front of her.
Yeah, we can see that straight away there.
Straight away she didn't feel the need to bounce this way to complete shoulder turn. It was all in an attempt, we figured out, to complete that shoulder turn, right? Her bounce was because she felt like she was getting to the top and she wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
Because she didn't complete her hip turn. She didn't complete her hip turn, she didn't complete her shoulder turn.
Yeah.
That caused that bounce, got it excessively inside. So straight away, just ensuring that we went to the top and we completed that pelvis turn. The arms stayed way more in front of her. And then from here, she was allowed to just rotate through without making a sacrifice to get that club from the inside excessively.
And I think we should mention that the follow-on effect of just working on this component of the backswing, the rest of it, very in a domino fashion, happened without her being conscious of it. She wasn't trying to micromanage this whole swing.
And this is the biggest bang for the buck again that I was speaking about at the start. You need to really identify what's going to make this player better instantly. She plays at the elite level, okay? So just fixing her pivot, fix some arm structure, fix what was going on with the arms during the backswing, fix the club path on the way down. So it was almost like a domino effect, and I talk a lot about a domino effect, one thing that precedes another, precedes another, precedes another.
Correct.
Right? So the idea for her, just to feel this, and just to feel that rotation of the pelvis freely going in the backswing without sliding, kept the club in front of her. She felt the club more in front of her, which is very important to an elite level player, feeling something happening. Feeling the club in front of her on the way down, she was still able to generate that path that creates the draw.
Yeah.
Essentially narrowing that pattern for her, and she was hitting a lot better golf shots straight away.
It's a fantastic drill. Usually when I'm working on pivot elements with players, I do a lot of very similar to yourself in regards to the feeling of pressure, and maybe occasionally I'll have something else, the trail hip, and getting them the sensation of creating some distance, but using a band around the knees. And we hear about this a lot. It's like, let's say that as a simple reference, your knees start X distance apart. And to create maximum power in the golf swing, if your knees, let's say, start wide, then they get narrow, then they shift back to wide, and then they finish narrow again. That changing of knee flex there is actually a considerable amount of force and pressure applied into the ground, which 100%. Creates speed.
And what it also does, this, just briefly touching on it, is it really activates the bigger muscles, especially your glutes. Okay, it gets your glutes really engaged by that setup position, rather than just being here, where nothing's really engaged and ready to go. You get here and you get in a much better setup. You get a little bit more lead side dominant, like I was speaking about, that she was suffering with starting too much on the right, so that was something that we touched on as well. So we made sure that she was more 55-60% lead side with that pressure, not a big shift of weight, just a bit of a, okay, there we go, I can feel a lot more.
An awareness, here. Closing the eyes, getting a
bit
feeling.
of an awareness, just to feel like, okay, that's level, I'm going to go 55-60% this side. And then from here, you can see straight away, this band feels really tight to me. And the first thing I want to happen with that is to relieve some pressure.
Okay.
That's beautiful. And that is exactly like you said, it relieves that pressure. You then go kind of wide to narrow, wide during transition, and then you can free up through the ball.
I'm going to grab that off you. I want to have a feel of it as we do this, because this is something that I've seen a lot of players do. I've seen it presented in the information that you put out, but I've actually never done it myself. So if I put it through here, and this is an element of my swing that I've worked on at times, of feeling a little bit more depth of pivot with my trail hip, so I can definitely get the idea and sensation of what we're talking about here. If I just shift slightly more onto my lead side, I'll also add in is what Alex was just saying there, with that little kind of bump and that push into the lead side, it just adds a little bit more of a dynamic flow to the motion, rather than getting too stuck. Now, the thing I love about this band is it's a whole motion. It's starting wide, it's feeling like it's getting a little bit looser to the top, and then moving back and through the golf ball, and you can hit some shots and they come out really quite nicely.
Yeah, that dynamic motion as well that you're talking about, and flow.
Yeah.
Flow is something that I'm big into, you know, lots of step drills, lots of movements with adding some athletic motion to the swing as opposed to being very static, very much like this. And you see a lot of the longer hitters nowadays and good players that have got a lot of flow. There's a bit of there's a waggle, you know, there's the feet that are shifting. They're kind of just getting set into this position, right? Instead of just getting into a ball and feeling very tight and just going, right, this is my setup position.
Yeah,
can't move.
exactly.
Just a little bit of flow, a little bit of a bump, and a bit more
Freedom
movement and freedom throughout the swing.
Yeah.
Something else big.
All right, so moving through this, the way that you work through this player, did you start off with dry drills, like slow swings?
Yeah, well, we started off dry drills without the club, and then we added the club.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
so the club across the shoulders?
Yeah, club across the shoulders.
Yeah.
Okay, so put your club across your shoulders there like that, perfect. But the way I like to do this drill as well, I like it predominantly at a trail side, and the club face matching spine angle. Okay?
Right. Okay.
Reason being, as you go to the top of your swing, there you go. You can almost feel like that point's almost at the ball, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then a good way to get it back to the ball is get that club face back to the ball now. There you go.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, so it's a good drill as well, just to start sequencing up your body and also get that pivot working a lot better through the ball.
Yeah,
so
that's fantastic.
Lots of dry drills, kind of getting here, rotating back to the ball. From there, introduce a club, slow drills, freeze drills, work it up and build it up into that full swing.
And just make mention quickly to the guys at home so they get a better understanding of why it's important to do dry drills where you're not just hitting balls. From your perspective, and I talk about this a lot with a lot of other coaches, is the way that you learn any skill in life is through slow, conscious, intentional movement patterns, building up over a long period of time.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd add to that?
I coin a term, movement literacy, right? And actually having the awareness and knowledge of how to move your body.
Yeah.
Right? That's why when you teach juniors and you teach people of a younger age, getting them to do everything from a standpoint of unrelated to golf and teach them how to throw a ball, teach them how to, you know, jump, teach them how to move with rotational movements through the body. Okay. Yeah. Movement literacy. If they understand how the body should move, right, and they understand what movements they need to make without a club, they're going to be a much better athlete when they have a club in their hands, right? So you get the best juniors and you get the best players on tour now as well. You know, you've got guys like, can't think of any guys' names, but played elite level basketball, or they played, Gary Woodland, he played like college basketball his whole career, and then all of a sudden he's a golfer, right? And it's because
these functional movement patterns.
These guys know these functional movement patterns, they understand movement literacy, they know how to move the body. So all of a sudden relating it to golf is very much like baseball. You get here, trail arm gets external, like everyone wants to talk about nowadays, is this movement, but down here on a different plane. That's all it is. And you're hitting a static ball, so it should be easier than hitting something that's coming at you at 90 mile an hour.
And the one thing I always make mention to clients is the reason that golf seems easy from a standpoint of someone who doesn't play it often, but then there's so many players around the world that get incredibly frustrated by it, is because it is a static game, but players get too static over the golf ball and they're not reactive enough to what they're doing out in front of them. If you're playing another sport and someone's going to throw a ball at you, let's say we're playing baseball, you're getting ready for it, you're moving, you're waggling. And this is why I love a drill like this, right? Because I'm setting up and I'm feeling like a little bit of a bump. Okay, wide
straight away you got
narrow,
that flow element as well.
And then it works in.
That flow element like you're talking about is just there. Like you're saying with baseball, you're here, you're just moving, your body's moving, you're ready to go. Introduce a lot of that into your golf swing and you're going to see some big improvements because you're going to be learning to be an athlete. Yeah,
mate, I love it. Okay, so I'm going to hit one down there. I'm going to work on getting this feel. I'm going to have a little bit of a bump into my lead side. I'm going to feel as a dry drill, wide to narrow. Good. That feels nice and loose at the top. Off we go. Mate, felt really powerful through the golf ball. Pivot, work wonders. Great job.